Now we're moving into Lesson 10, the core focus of Unit 3. And this lesson kind of combines things that you've learned throughout the unit. There are some things that I want to encourage you to focus on, and there's some others that you can review that aren't necessarily the most important things. For instance, right here it talks about the fraction multiplication steps. And I'm going to write 3/4 times 2/6 on my paper just to talk to you a little bit about what we want to do. Now, in a situation like this, we can encourage students to read or simplify a fraction first. So right here we know that both of these numbers are even, and we can remember that we had the t-chart and we think about the factors. We remember 1 and the number itself are both factors of a number, and then there's nothing else between 1 and 2, so 1 times 2 is 2. And then when we think of 6, 1 times 6 is 6, but I also know that 2 times 3 is 6. So the common factor would be 2, and we always want the least common factor. That we wouldn't want to pick, for instance, if these numbers were larger, we wouldn't want to pick something over here if there was already a 2. So we can simplify 3 or 2/6 by dividing the numerator and the denominator by 2. And 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. We also want to remind students that this 2 over 2 is the same as dividing by 1 whole. So the digits may have gotten smaller, but the amount is the same. 2/6 is equivalent or the same as 1/3. They represent the same amount, and this is important to show with fraction strips and models. Now, when we write this over, we have 3/4 times 1/3 instead of the other. Now, one thing that students in 5th grade are not required to do that is in the OLS is this cross, like where they divide out the factors, which is talked about right here in the steps. What I would encourage you to do is, it's not going to be harmful to go through that step, but what I would encourage you to do is to help your student think about that commutative property. When we multiply or add numbers, we can multiply and divide in any order. So I can keep my numerators the same, but I could switch the order of my denominators. And look what happens. We now have 3 over 3, which is the same as 1 whole. So when we multiply 1/4 times 1, we get 1/4. So instead of just going through a list of steps like this, we do want to simplify first, or according to them we don't, but they want to divide out the common factors. That's why I do not like these procedures, because there is not a set list of rules and procedures. Even I got it wrong. Apparently they're wanting you to divide out the common factors first, but that is not a strategy that we want to teach our students. So I would avoid some of this. I would work out problems on a sheet of paper and just talk it through with your child. There's going to be some additional things just like this where they drop and drag, but remember, I would encourage them to draw a model instead of thinking about a list of steps, which are very abstract and procedural. So here we are going to head into some offline activities, and it says there were no materials that you needed to gather, but when you go to the lesson guide from the coach's guide, you can go to this core focus multiplication of fractions, and it will guide you on what to do through each component of the lesson. You can see that there are 3 components that are offline that are something that you are to work through with your child, and so the guide will walk through all of those activities with you. Again, if it's just listing a bunch of steps, don't focus on that as much. The thing that is important are the story problems. That's the most important part of this unit. So as you go through, we want kids to understand why you might multiply and divide fractions. And so the story problems really help the students see it in context and with models. So as you go through, here's an example of a word problem, and it shows how to model the question. And then the students will have the opportunity to go through some of those activities themselves and work through word problems and find things that will are suitable. And understanding whether you need to multiply or divide is a critical key component. As you can see, this lesson combines multiplication and division. This particular lesson is all on multiplication, but in the OLS, you're going to see combinations of multiplication and division for this core focus activity. So now, as we head back to the OLS, you will have some additional practice with story problems and a lesson checkpoint. So let's take a peek at what you will see, and we'll review some of the types of questions. This is one that you will be able to print off. So I'm going to open that up. The answer key is there so that you can preview that before you go through this activity with your students, so you can talk about it and model it the appropriate way. As we said, it's all about multiplication stories and being able to represent those. And the other critical component is the explain your thinking. How do you know? So using those models instead of just following a list of steps is what we want students to do. When we say explain their thinking, students shouldn't say, I cross simplified and I reduced or found the common factors, and then I did this and I did that. They don't want to know the steps. They want to know why it works. So there are several problems for you to go through, but as I mentioned, you can preview that answer sheet and help your child understand what it is like to explain their thinking with multiplication and division, which can be kind of tricky at times. And then here is another example of some of those story problems and the types of answers that you can get. So I hope this helps. There will not be a unit checkpoint for this, but you can work through your child on the extended problem solving. Remember, to find that extended problem solving activity, simply go to resources, and then under resources, open up the fraction multiplication unit, and then there you will see the extended problem solving reasoning and extended problem solving answer key. You can also see those core focus checkpoints that I was just talking about, along with other answer keys and resources that can be very beneficial. The other thing that is important for this unit is there are fraction circles and centimeter grid paper and fraction strips that can be used throughout the lessons so that your child would be successful with computing with fractions. Thank you.